To be clear and factual, the president has very little control over the price of gasoline. But today, President Biden rolled out his three-part plan to try to push them lower. In the latest NBC poll, more than 1 in 5 Americans say the cost of living is their top priority, and gas prices are a huge part of that. Well, this afternoon, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said relief is going to come, but it's going to take time.
The industry tells us it'll take a few months for them to ramp up production and make up the lost Russian oil. And so in the meantime, what we're doing is this release of 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's a bridge in our supply to get us to where domestic produced oil can make up what we've lost from Russia.
Let's welcome former Senator Heidi Heitkamp. As North Dakota's first elected female senator, she served on the Senate Banking Committee as well as the Committee on Homeland Security. She's also the founder of the One Country Project, a group that helps rural communities. Heidi, I'm so glad you're here. President Biden is making these big moves on energy. You're in a rural state where people drive a lot. Are North Dakotans willing to give Biden some time to see if this plan works? And if it doesn't, does he get credit for trying?
I think the simple answer is no. I think that the narrative that's out there is that this is a problem that's basically been caused by the Biden administration. You have done a tremendous amount of career work in markets. You know better, I know better. This has been a fundamental kind of shift in how the shale industry has operated in the United States of America. And so when you have the go-go times, overspent, overpromised, investors said stop. We reduced the amount of output that happened even before COVID. We saw this downturn before COVID. And now we see investors saying, look, this has to be certain before we begin to really amp up domestic production. And so right now, I mean, there's a whole lot of political talk around this, but the reality is that this is not a problem that's going to get solved tomorrow. He can, if he comes out, if Biden politically comes out and says, I'm going to solve this problem by opening up the strategic reserve, I'm going to solve this problem by lowering the primary time period for oil and gas leases on public lands, and nothing happens, which is likely what's going to happen, that there isn't going to be a dramatic long-term result as a result of that, because we haven't dealt with the fundamentals. That's just going to make people in my state and really people across the country more cynical and not less cynical.
Then to that very point, right, we keep saying it's 1 million barrels a day. It's unprecedented. But we use 20 million a day, and we're going into the summer when we drive more than any other time of the year. So 1 million barrels is a drop in the bucket. Plus, the president said it today, maybe it'll go down 10 cents, maybe 35 cents. Even if it's 35 cents, will that be enough for people? Gas prices are well over $1 higher than they were a year ago.
Well, I think the administration, Stephanie, is really trying hard to blame Putin. But if you go back and you take a look at what is the margin of growth in oil prices that you could really attribute to the war in Ukraine, well, guess what? We had oil prices bumping up on $90 a barrel before there was ever an invasion in Ukraine. And that was because we had a supply-demand challenge, and on purpose. And today, when you look at, you look at the Dallas Fed, they do great work in analyzing the oil industry. Their survey of their producers basically tell them that these producers say we need $100 a barrel before the fundamentals will actually achieve what we need to do to make the investment and make our investors happy. Now, in the good news, everybody might have been shocked that Jamie Dimon went to the White House to talk about energy. Guess what? The investor community has a huge role in this. And if I'm Biden, what I would be talking about right now is how to provide long-term, policy stability for the oil and gas industry so that they can make the investments without having stranded investment, so that we can actually achieve goals, set those climate goals, but basically give them a path forward for basically profitability into the future. And if you don't do that, they're not going to make the investments. There's a lot of talk about eliminating intangible drilling costs. A lot of talk about percentage depletion and eliminating that, which has been on the tax book since the 1920s to encourage domestic production. And so when we look at all of these things, what I'm saying is people are going to be cynical because these short-term kind of sound bites are not going to get the results people want to get. Have a long-term strategy so that come the midterms, you actually are seeing $3 or less oil or gas at the pump. And then people will say, he did it. Not, oh yeah, he gave us some promises and nothing happened. And I hate to be cynical about this, honestly, but these short-term things, shortening lease times, opening up the strategic reserve, are not going to get you a long-term result.
But it's also not cynical. It's not honest, right? America watched the president pressuring oil and gas companies today. But do people realize those CEOs, they don't work for the president. They don't answer to him. The truth is, whether we like it or not, they answer to shareholders. And shareholders like higher prices. They like big profits. And truthfully, they want those companies to spend on buybacks and dividends, not on drilling and exploration. That is the ugly truth.
Well, and then you have Mitch McConnell saying this is government regulation. Hey, Mitch, read the report. Read what the industry is actually saying. Less than 10% this is about government. It's about government regulation. What they're saying is we need to have long-term profitability before we make long-term investments. So how do we get that done? We know we need American energy. I was criticized roundly by the people on the left side of my party because I pushed for oil exports. I thought that was critical not only for our energy security, but for our national security. Understand the industry, apply the fundamentals, listen to what they're saying, and then respond so that they can make those long-term investments that are going to get us where we need to go in terms of lower costs and actually predictable national security goals and objectives being met.
The balance between ideals and getting practical.